He vanished. He didn't get lost. He didn't walk away. He didn't leave. He vanished. With the camera rolling, the tracker active, the route mapped out, and 3 hours of footage that kept existing after he stopped existing in that place. The footage is here. The audio is here. His face looking into the lens is here. What isn't here is him. And no one, no authority, no expert, no open investigation to this day has been able to write a single line explaining what happened between the last recorded frame and the moment the search team arrived and found only the space where he should have been. Not a body, not scattered belongings, no signs of departure. The space, clean, intact, as if the place absorbed a person and sealed itself behind him without leaving a seam. The place has a name. Locals say it slowly, almost with their mouths closed, as if the speed of the word might trigger something that prefers not to be triggered. El Pasaje, the passage. It's not poetic, it's a warning. Because at that exact point in the Sierra Tarahumara, the ground doesn't behave like ground. Time doesn't pass like time. And people disappear in ways no report has ever described, without contradicting itself. Daniel Orozco was 26 years old. He had real experience in high-risk zones, professional equipment, and the conviction of someone who had never encountered anything he couldn't name. El Pasaje named him. What you're about to watch isn't about a disappearance. It's about a fracture in the world, a hole where a person used to be. And the hole didn't close. The case remains open. Daniel is still missing. If you're not subscribed to this channel yet, do it now. Hit like, turn on notifications, because what you're about to watch isn't the kind of content the algorithm serves up twice. And before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Now pay close attention. There's a point in the Sierra Tarahumara that doesn't appear on any tourist map. There's no sign, no fence, no official marker warning that something is wrong there. The terrain looks like terrain. The vegetation looks like vegetation. The trail looks like a trail. Nothing about that place signals what it does to people who enter it intending to understand what it is. Daniel Orozco entered with that intention. He had researched the place for 9 months. He had documented cases, cataloged testimonies, mapped coordinates. He knew other people had entered that stretch and come back shaken, without memory, without explanation for the missing time between entering and leaving. He knew some never came back at all. He went anyway. On the 3rd day in the mountains, his scheduled check-in didn't happen. On the 4th day, the silence had weight. On the 5th day, the search team reached the coordinates he had left behind and found something none of them could describe coherently in the official report, a report that was later discovered to have been partially reprinted before being archived for reasons no one ever explained. This happened. It's documented. And there is no answer. What you're about to see is everything that exists about the case of Daniel Orozco and the place that swallowed him. Daniel Orozco didn't stumble into this story. He pursued it methodically, patiently, with a level of determination that people close to him now describe with a discomfort they can't quite hide. What they feel isn't guilt. It's something harder to name. The sense that at some point they should have realized he was approaching something that didn't have human proportions. That the project he called the biggest of my career wasn't creator grandiosity. It was a warning no one knew how to read. He began researching El Pasaje in June 2018, 9 months before he disappeared. The starting point was an obscure Spanish-language forum, where an anonymous user described a personal experience in the Sierra Tarahumara, a reconnaissance hike that lasted, according to his watch, 40 minutes, but according to the camera timestamp when he powered it back on, 3 hours and 42 minutes. The user wasn't asking for an explanation. He was issuing a warning. He ended the post with a single line that Daniel copied into the notebook where he logged his research. Don't go back to find what stayed there, because what stayed there isn't yours. The profile was deleted 2 days later. The post vanished with it. Daniel didn't interpret that as a reason to back off. He saw it as confirmation that there was something real to document. He began mapping similar accounts with the discipline of someone assembling a dossier, not an enthusiast, but someone trained to distinguish pattern from coincidence. And the patterns were there, not few, not vague. Between 1987 and 2018, at least 11 people disappeared within a 2.5-mile radius of the point locals in Batopilas, the nearest municipality, referred to simply as the entrance to the Passage. Of those 11, 3 were found. None of the 3 provided a coherent account of what happened. One woman, located nearly 4 miles from where she entered, was disoriented, suffering from moderate hypothermia, and insisted she had started the trail that morning. When search teams found her, it was close to midnight. One man, rescued after 4 days of searching, was sitting on a rock less than half a mile from the main road, in an area that had already been swept twice. He had no explanation for where he'd been. No memory of the missing period. The third case was the most disturbing, a 23-year-old researcher who entered with an experienced local guide. The guide returned alone the same day, not a scratch on him, unable to explain where she had gone, and never altering the statement he gave police. She had simply stopped being beside him, and he couldn't identify the exact moment it happened. She was found 8 days later, alive, but in a state of severe disorientation that lasted weeks. She never gave an interview, never published anything about what happened. She moved out of state 3 months after being rescued. Daniel had all of these cases cataloged, names, dates, police reports he obtained through formal public records requests to authorities in Chihuahua, aerial photographs of the region, topographic maps, transcripts of conversations with 2 residents of Batopilas who agreed to speak as long as he didn't use their real names in the video. One of them, identified only as R in Daniel's notes, described El Pasaje with a precision that had nothing folkloric about it. He said the problem wasn't the place itself. It was what the place did to perception. That people left without knowing how long they had been inside. That some were convinced they had walked miles when in reality they had barely moved. And that the ones who didn't return weren't necessarily the least prepared, according to R. But they were the ones who entered intending to understand, as if the place responded differently to those who tried to decode it. Daniel underlined that twice, according to photographs of the notebook his family shared with search coordinators, and he continued planning the trip. In January 2019, 2 months before leaving, he recorded a planning video, never published, found later on the external hard drive left in his Guadalajara apartment, explaining the structure of what the project would be. 15 minutes. Static camera. Daniel seated at a desk, notebook stacked beside him, maps spread open. His voice is calm. His posture is calm. At one point, without changing expression, he says, "If something goes wrong in there, it won't be because I wasn't prepared." It'll be because the place is bigger than anything preparation can cover. Then he moves on to the next outline point, as if he had just commented on the weather. Investigators later said that video disturbed them more than anything else. Not because of the sentence alone, but because of what it revealed about his state of mind before departure. He knew there was a variable he couldn't control, and he went anyway. In March 2019, Daniel flew to Chihuahua with a 40-pound pack, professional filming equipment, and a 5-day plan inside the mountains. The day before entering the trail, he stayed at a small inn in Batopilas and had dinner with one of the locals he had previously interviewed remotely, not R, but an older man who agreed to meet him in person. After Daniel disappeared, his family tracked the man down. He spoke briefly by phone with Daniel's brother. He said that during dinner, he tried one last time to dissuade him. He told Daniel that El Pasaje was not a place to document, because documentation assumes the observer remains separate from what he observes, and inside that place, that separation doesn't hold. Daniel thanked him for dinner, paid the check, and went to sleep. The next morning at 6:43 a.m., his camera recorded his entry onto the trail. The sky still carried that gray pre-dawn tone, giving way to daylight. The vegetation was dense. The rocks were dark with moisture. The silence was so compact that the camera microphone captured the friction of his boot soles against the ground with almost surgical clarity. He walked for 3 hours and 11 minutes of continuous recording before saying the first strange thing. He stopped in the middle of the trail, looked to the side, and said quietly, not to the camera, not to anyone visible, but to something off-frame to his left. That wasn't here before. And he kept walking. The footage Daniel left behind is the most disturbing part of the entire case, not because of what it explicitly shows, because of what it shows peripherally, details that appear in frame without him seeming to notice, inconsistencies that only become visible when the material is watched more than once, with attention directed toward what's happening outside the center of the image. Investigators who analyze the footage describe the process as producing a growing discomfort that was difficult to rationalize. One of the technicians later told Daniel's brother, in an informal conversation, that he spent 3 days watching the material on loop and that with each review he noticed something new. Not because the video changed, because it was too dense to absorb all at once. There are 6 hours and 48 minutes of recording divided into 3 files. The first file covers the trail entry and the first hours of hiking. Daniel in documentation mode, narrating the environment, describing vegetation, commenting on topography with the fluency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. His voice is steady, his pace consistent. Nothing in this section suggests any alteration in his state, except for one thing. In 42 minutes of recording, he doesn't mention a single animal sound. No birds. No insects. For anyone familiar with the Sierra Tarahumara, that absence shouldn't exist. The range is dense with life. The silence captured by the microphone isn't the silence of a peaceful environment. It's the silence of something paused. The second file begins with an abrupt cut. The camera was turned off and back on, something Daniel hadn't done until that moment. The timestamp shows an 11-minute gap between the end of the first file and the beginning of the second. "11 minutes with no recording, no explanation, no later reference from him about what occurred. When the second file begins, Daniel is standing still, back turned to the camera he has placed on a rock, staring at the vegetation ahead. He remains like that for 47 seconds without moving. Then he turns, picks up the camera, and resumes narration as if nothing happened. His voice is still steady, but the direction he takes from that point doesn't match the route he had planned. He goes left when he was supposed to go right. He doesn't comment on it, doesn't correct himself, doesn't hesitate. He goes left as if left were the only direction that exists. Over the next 2 hours of recording, 3 things happen that analysts were unable to explain satisfactorily. The first, at one point Daniel stops, points the camera at the ground, and films his own footprints in the mud for nearly 2 minutes without speaking. There is nothing abnormal about the footprints themselves. What's abnormal is that there are only two isolated impressions, not a sequence of steps, but two pressure points separated by a distance greater than any normal human stride could cover. Daniel looks at them, looks at the camera, and says, "I don't remember stepping here," then lowers the camera and keeps going. The second, 40 minutes later, he narrates that he's approaching a rock formation he identifies as a reference point from his map, a stone with a vertical fissure visible in the aerial photographs he studied. He describes it in precise detail. The problem is that in the footage, there is no rock in frame. There is dense vegetation, flat earth, light filtering through the canopy. No formation, no fissure. He describes something the camera does not record as if he sees it clearly. Pause there. Daniel Orozco was not a disoriented amateur. He was experienced in fieldwork, trained to observe and narrate accurately. And in that moment, he was calmly describing in detail something that did not exist in the frame. This wasn't documented hallucination, not a fleeting confusion. It was a dissociation between what he perceived and what physically existed, functioning with total composure, without any sign of internal alarm. That is more disturbing than anything the camera could have shown. Because it suggests el pasaje did not act on Daniel's body. It acted on the filter through which he processed reality, and he didn't notice. The third anomaly is the hardest to describe without sounding exaggerated, so the numbers need to stand on their own. The second file is 2 hours and 3 minutes long. When investigators measured Daniel's displacement using the GPS tracker, which logged coordinates every 15 minutes, they found that in 2 hours he had traveled 1,115 feet. Not miles, not even half a mile. Feet. In relatively flat terrain, without visible obstacles in the footage, an experienced hiker with Daniel's conditioning should have covered between 1 and 2 miles in that time. He covered just over 1,000 feet. At no point in the recording does he appear to be moving slowly. His pace looks normal. His perception of forward progress sounds normal. The numbers are not normal. The third file begins in the afternoon. The light has shifted to that late-day golden angle. Daniel is seated, eating, narration back to its methodical tone. He comments on camp setup, checks the tracker signal, verifies battery levels. For 20 minutes, everything appears expected. Then he stops eating, becomes completely still, and directs his gaze toward a fixed point to his right, outside the camera frame. He remains like that for 2 minutes and 40 seconds without blinking, without moving, without any audible change in breathing. Then he says, in a calm devoid of emotional texture, "There's someone on the other side." He doesn't explain what the other side means. He doesn't point. He doesn't move the camera to show what he sees. He packs the rest of his food away, checks his equipment one more time, and lies down to sleep as if the sentence had never been spoken. That is the last recording from day 3. On day 4, the file that should exist doesn't. The GPS tracker registered activity until 4:17 a.m. Movement, not stationary, coordinates advancing toward what investigators later identified as the approximate center of El Pasaje. After 4:17, the signal stopped. It didn't fade gradually the way it does when a battery dies. It stopped. Active log, and then nothing. No transition, no signal degradation. No technical anomaly to justify the interruption. The camera was found. It was on the ground, powered on, lens pointed upward, recording the sky for 11 hours until the battery died. No movement in frame, no sound other than wind, no explanation for how it reached the location where it was recovered, 247 feet from the last recorded GPS coordinates, in a direction that didn't match any route Daniel had planned. Daniel wasn't with the camera. Daniel wasn't anywhere the search teams were able to reach, and what he meant by the other side has never been answered by anyone who set foot in that stretch after him. The search team entered the Sierra Tarahumara on the 5th day after Daniel's last signal. There were 7 of them, 3 officers from the Chihuahua State Police, 2 local guides hired by the family, and 2 volunteers experienced in high-altitude rescue operations. Daniel's brother, Marcos Orozco, tried to go in with them. The local guides refused. It wasn't a procedural refusal involving liability waivers or insurance concerns. It was direct, firm. Delivered in a tone that left no room for negotiation. Marcos would not enter. No family member would. When he pressed for an explanation, one of the guides, the older one, who had known the region for more than 30 years, said only that the place they were heading wasn't suitable for someone emotionally connected to the missing person. Marcos didn't understand at the time. Later he realized it wasn't policy. It was a warning. The team spent 2 days inside the mountains before returning without Daniel, and without any material evidence explaining his disappearance. What they found, documented in the official report the family obtained months later through an attorney, was a collection of absences that together felt more disturbing than any physical evidence would have. Daniel's campsite was located. It was intact. The tent was pitched. The sleeping bag was open, as if someone had gotten up normally. Personal belongings were arranged with the same methodical organization Daniel used on every trip, according to his brother, who recognized the pattern immediately from the report photographs. The remaining food was inside the pack. The external hard drive containing video backups was inside the pack. The research notebook was inside the pack. Nothing taken. Nothing disturbed. The campsite didn't look like a place someone had fled in an emergency. It looked like a place someone had stepped away from briefly and hadn't yet returned. Except the tracker had stopped 247 feet away. Except the camera had been found in a direction that made no geographic sense. Except the ground around the camp, examined by guides who had spent their lives reading terrain, showed no exit tracks. Daniel's footprints led to the campsite. They did not lead away from it. That detail, the absence of outgoing tracks, unsettled the experienced guides more than anything else. According to what Marcos was later told, one of them crouched at the entrance of the tent for a long time, studying the soil, before standing and saying something was wrong with that specific patch of ground. He couldn't elaborate. He said the earth felt different, not visually, not in texture, but in a way he didn't have language for. The other guide stepped back from the campsite without commenting and did not return until the team was ready to continue the search. On the second day, they expanded the search radius outward from the campsite, covering approximately 4.6 square miles using standard high-altitude grid methodology. Systematic sweeps, marked verification points, constant radio communication. They found no recent signs of human passage other than Daniel's incoming trail and their own. No additional footprints. No broken vegetation, no discarded items, no evidence of a fall, an animal encounter, or a struggle. Nothing. What they did find, at 2 separate points roughly 984 feet apart, was something the official report describes in deliberately technical language that fails to conceal the confusion beneath it. At those 2 points, the team's compasses displayed inconsistent readings. They didn't spin erratically. That would have been identifiable behavior. typically associated with magnetic anomalies. Instead, the compasses stopped. They pointed in one direction and did not respond to rotation, repositioning, or movement, as if north had been fixed in that position and could not be questioned. The officers' handheld GPS units continued functioning. But when coordinates were cross-referenced with topographic maps, they placed team members inside a rock formation that does not exist at that elevation, according to official Mexican geographic surveys. The officers recorded this in the report as possible technical interference due to local geological characteristics. 7 technical words to cover something none of them could name honestly. Because what the frozen compasses represented wasn't simply a geological anomaly. It was confirmation that they were standing inside a space that did not operate by the same rules as the space they had left behind when they entered the trail. And they continued searching anyway, not out of bravery, but because the alternative was to say out loud what the compasses were implying. On the afternoon of the second day, the older guide requested they end before sunset. He didn't argue. He simply said he and the other guide would be leaving before the sun dropped behind the ridge. The officers left with them. The final report is 43 pages. 38 are standardized forms, 5 are narrative. And those 5 pages bear a different print date than the rest. They were reprinted before being archived. The original version has never been located. When Marcos formally requested the prior version, he was informed that no alternate version existed in the system. What was replaced in those 5 pages, no one has answered. What was removed before the report became official record, no one has explained. What the officers wrote in the first draft that could not remain in the file, that is the question that lingers, because someone within the Chihuahua State Police structure decided there was something in those pages that should not be read, and that decision was made quietly, without notation, without justification. As if the system itself had learned from El Pasaje that some things are safer when they do not exist on paper. Daniel Orozco was never found. The case was archived as a voluntary disappearance in a high-risk area, a classification the family continues to contest in court, with no expectation of reversal. El Pasaje remains unmarked, unfenced, accessible, and the original 5 pages remain unaccounted for in any official archive within the state of Chihuahua. Daniel wasn't the first. That's the part authorities in Chihuahua never compiled into a single document, never officially connected, never presented as a pattern, because acknowledging the pattern would mean acknowledging a problem that has no solution within the tools they have. But the pattern exists. It's scattered across police reports from 3 different decades, in accounts collected by independent researchers. In conversations residents of Batopilas have among themselves with the kind of normalcy that only exists when something stops being an exception and becomes part of the landscape. After his brother's disappearance, Marcos Orozco spent 8 months doing what the official investigation did not, connecting the cases. He wasn't an investigator. He was a high school history teacher in Guadalajara, trained to distinguish primary sources from rumor, data from speculation. He applied that method to what he found. What he found wasn't rumor. It was a series of concrete records sharing a common denominator no one had been interested or willing to articulate out loud. The oldest case Marcos documented with precision dates back to 1991. A tour guide named Aurelio Soto, 51 years old, disappeared during an expedition with 4 foreign tourists in the northeastern region of the Sierra Tarahumara. The tourists returned. Aurelio did not. Their statement to police was simple. The group briefly separated to rest in an open stretch of trail. When they regrouped, Aurelio was no longer where he had been standing. There were no exit tracks, no signs of disturbance, only the spot where he had been, and then the space where he wasn't. The case was closed as a mountain accident. No body was found. In 1998, a woman named Socorro Villanueva, 38, a schoolteacher, entered a section of the range she frequented regularly. It was a route she had known for years. She returned 4 days later in a state of severe disorientation, with no memory of the missing period. Her clothes were clean despite 4 days of exposure, and the watch on her wrist had stopped at 4:17 a.m. Not 4:17 on a specific documented day, just 4:17, as if the mechanism had reached that moment and found nothing beyond it worth measuring. When Marcos cross-referenced that time with the moment Daniel's tracker stopped, 4:17 a.m. He reportedly stared at his computer screen for an unmeasured span of time before closing it and not returning to the files for 3 weeks. When he did return, he found more. In 2004, 2 anthropology students entered the region to document cultural practices of the Raramuri people. One came back, the other did not. The one who returned, Ivan Herrera, 22, gave a 6-page statement to police, later obtained by Marcos through the same attorney who secured Daniel's search report. In the first 5 pages, Ivan describes the hike and the moments before his colleague vanished with total clarity and coherence. On the 6th page, when the investigator asks directly what he saw at the moment of disappearance, the transcript notes, "Prolonged silence, approximately 4 minutes." Then a single sentence, "He went where the place wanted him to go." The investigator asked what that meant. Ivan did not respond further. The interview was concluded. The colleague was never found. An independent researcher named Carmen Reyes spent 5 days in the region in 2011 studying geomagnetic anomalies in mountainous terrain. She returned physically unharmed. She abandoned the project. She never published her findings. When Marcos eventually obtained her contact information and wrote explaining who he was and what he was researching, she replied with 3 words: "Don't go there." There were also accounts from the Raramuri, the people who have inhabited the Sierra Tarahumara for centuries, in a relationship with that territory that is not academic, not recreational, and not recent. Through a cultural intermediary, Marcos was able to speak indirectly with members of the community willing to discuss El Pasaje. What he received was not a supernatural narrative. There were no entities described. What emerged instead was an old and precise understanding that this specific point in the mountains is a place where the rules organizing human experience, time, space, presence, do not apply in the same way. The Raramuri do not call it dangerous. They call it different. And that distinction matters. Danger implies something intending harm. Different implies something simply not built to accommodate what you are. Marcos compiled everything into a 117-page document and sent it to Mexico's National Human Rights Commission, the Federal Public Ministry, and 3 investigative journalists. The commission acknowledged receipt, then went silent. The federal ministry never responded. 2 journalists did not reply. The 3rd responded, saying he had read the material, found it solid, and would not publish anything. No explanation. In September 2020, 18 months after Daniel disappeared, Marcos traveled to the mountains with the cultural intermediary. Not to enter. To approach the outer boundary, the point roughly 1.2 miles out that locals identify as the unofficial line between normal terrain and what is not. They reached it. They stopped. Later, in a message to a close friend, Marcos described feeling something that wasn't fear. It was more primitive than fear. A physical sensation that something ahead recognized his presence, that the place knew who he was, that the fact he was Daniel's brother was relevant to El Pasaje in a way he did not have the framework to understand. He did not enter. He turned back the same day. And what he felt at that boundary, that recognition without source, that presence without form, may be the most disturbing detail in the entire case. Because Daniel went there to document the place. But the place, it seems, already knew he was coming. The question Marcos cannot answer, and no one else has attempted to answer, is this. If El Pasaje recognized the brother, what did it do with Daniel when it recognized him? There is a photograph Marcos Orozco cannot throw away, and cannot look at for more than a few seconds at a time. It was extracted from a single frame in Daniel's second video file, the one with the displacement inconsistencies, the footprints Daniel said he didn't remember making, the description of the rock formation the camera never captured. The image is not from the center of the frame. It's from the far right edge, a peripheral section the lens recorded while Daniel was pointing the camera somewhere else. Dense vegetation, heavy shadow, filtered light creating enough contrast for shapes to separate from background, and in that corner, there is a shape. The technicians who analyzed the footage could not classify it. It isn't a tree. It isn't a rock formation. It isn't an animal identifiable by silhouette. It is a vertical form, taller than the surrounding vegetation, completely still in that frame. It does not appear in the frame before. It does not appear in the frame after. It exists in exactly one frame, 1/24th of a second, and then it's gone. The technicians described it as a visual artifact possibly caused by lighting variation and vegetation movement. Marcos sent the frame to 2 professional photographers and a digital image analysis specialist without explaining the context. All 3 said it was not an artifact, that there was something there, that they didn't know what it was. Marcos doesn't claim to know either. But he keeps the printed image inside the 117-page document no one agreed to publish, tucked between Ivan Herrera's transcript and Carmen Reyes's 3-word email. What happened to Daniel Orozco in the Sierra Tarahumara in March 2019 has no answer. That statement isn't resignation. It isn't rhetoric. It is the factual condition of the case. There is no explanation that accounts for all the data without creating larger contradictions than the ones it resolves. There is no geological explanation for compasses freezing in non-chaotic ways at specific points. No physiological explanation for a hiker covering what feels like miles while moving just over 1,000 feet, without any visible change in pace. No technical explanation for an active GPS tracker stopping abruptly without signal degradation. No human explanation for footprints that arrive at a place and do not leave it. And there is no explanation of any kind for the time. 4:17 a.m. 2 people, 23 years apart. The same rupture point, if time is even the right word for what that place does to the experience of those who enter it. Researchers who study disappearances in remote regions of Latin America have an informal term for cases that accumulate anomalies without resolution. They call them wall cases. Not because there is a physical barrier blocking investigation, but because every investigative path eventually reaches a point where the available tools simply stop functioning. No more data to collect, no more testimony to cross-reference, no more analysis to apply. There is the case on one side, the investigator on the other, and between them, something that has no technical name and does not respond to method. El Pasaje is a wall case, Daniel Orozco is a wall case. And what makes that classification more disturbing than any alternative theory is that it closes nothing. It only names the impasse. The hole remains open. The absence remains imposed. The space where a person once existed remains exactly that. Not a place someone went, not a place someone got lost, but a place where someone existed, and then that existence was interrupted in a way no human instrument has described with precision. In September 2020, 18 months after Daniel disappeared, Marcos made one final attempt to return to the mountains. Not to enter El Pasaje. To approach the outer boundary, the point roughly 1. "2 miles out, that locals identify as the unofficial threshold between normal terrain and what is not. He went with the same cultural intermediary who had facilitated conversations with the Raramuri. They reached the point. They stopped. Later, in a message to a close friend who authorized the account to be shared, Marcos described feeling something he could not label as fear, because it wasn't fear. It was more primitive. A physical sense that something ahead recognized him. That the place knew he was Daniel's brother, that this information mattered to the place in a way he could not comprehend. He did not enter. He returned to Batopilas and left the same day. He has not gone back. Daniel Orozco remains missing. The legal challenge against the voluntary disappearance classification remains ongoing, with no clear resolution ahead. The 117-page document remains unpublished. The original search report remains unaccounted for. The camera that recorded 11 hours of sky is stored in his parents' home in Guadalajara. The external hard drive is there. The notebooks are there. And somewhere in the Sierra Tarahumara, in a place locals pronounce carefully, in a place the Raramuri describe as different rather than dangerous, El Pasaje remains exactly where it has always been. No sign, no fence. No official marker indicating that people went there and did not return in ways that defy explanation in any institutional archive. Daniel's case is not closed because cases do not close themselves. They close with answers, and there is no answer. There are data logs that stop at 4:17 a.m. There are footprints that arrive and do not leave. There is a shape in a single frame of video that exists for 1/24 of a second and has no name. There is a brother who reached the boundary of a place and felt that the place knew who he was. There is a hole where a person used to be, and the hole does not close. If this video reached you, hit like now. Not as a reflex, but because what you just watched was researched, built, and narrated, so this case does not continue being swallowed by the silence that has protected El Pasaje for decades. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next cases carry the same depth, the same severity, and the same commitment to what has no easy answer. Now tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? This channel is built by the people